Hello everyone, welcome back to Touch the Fire Twice. I'm Joshua, and I'm here today to introduce a new video series titled Name That Note, a series that we will dig into single fragrance notes, talk about the history, the origins of the note itself, how it has grown, what it has been used for over the centuries, the actual scent, the types of fragrance categories that the note can be used in, how it can express itself in different ways. And then we'll actually spend some time digging into different fragrance categories where that note is used. But before we dig into the note in today's video, if you're new to Touch the Fire Twice, welcome. My mission here is to share my love and passion for fine home fragrance as an enthusiast, an educator, a reviewer, to inspire you to increase your own fragrance knowledge and understanding, ultimately enhancing the scent memories that you create. If you want to learn more about what I do, why I do it, how I do it, you can check out my website at TouchTheFireTwice.com. But today, let's dig into the fragrance note, name that note, Plum. So, plums. I think most of us are familiar with plums. We probably eat them most summers, but how much do you know about the history of plums and what a plum really truly smells like other than a sweet fruit and how it is used? So let's talk first about the plum fruit itself. So it is an oval, fleshy, round fruit, purple, reddish, a yellow flesh, and is a stone fruit, so it has that flat single pit or seed in the center. According to a professor of food history, it originated likely in Iran, though it is spread all throughout Asia and Europe and nearly all continents at this point in many different forms. So there are actually 400 plus varieties of plums. The most common plums that are eaten today, at least in like the Western world, is going to be the Chinese or Japanese plum. But again, there are hundreds of varieties that are used in many different forms because plums can be used for just the actual fruit itself, to make jam, to make plum wine, to make salted plums, pickled, make it into a paste, make it into a cider. There's so many uses for the plum fruit itself. And the taste of a plum really ranges from sweet to a little bit tart. The skin itself can be particularly tart, almost kind of tannic, like drying, almost like a dry red wine can sometimes be from the stems and skins of grapes. Typically, they're very juicy, very sweet when ripe, almost a little bit of a honeyed essence to it, and a little bit of that tart kind of sourness sometimes playing in the background too, especially if it's not fully ripe. When you think about comparing to the other traditional stone fruits, your peaches, your apricots, your nectarines, your apricots are very creamy, smooth, a balance of sweet and tart. Peaches are super juicy, very soft and fleshy, the sweetest of stone fruits. And the nectarines won't have the fuzz of a peach. They'll be a little bit firmer than peaches, very similar, almost interchangeable flavor profiles, and maybe a little bit more of that tanginess. Now that's the plum fruit itself. How does it express itself, or how is it expressed in fine fragrance? So it's often going to bring a velvety sweet richness to fragrances, almost a bit floral, sort of a syrupy sweetness, or sometimes a dried fruit intensity. Sometimes waxy, again, that honeyed sweetness. Usually richer than other stone fruits, not necessarily as bright and poppy and summery, but a bit darker and more sophisticated, seductive, alluring, often adjectives used to describe plum in fragrances. Sometimes comes across almost as like a marzipan, which of course is a sweetened almond paste. And it is used in a wide spectrum of fine fragrance categories. So it can be in sweet, fruity, floral, woody, spicy, gourmand. Truly, plum can find a place across nearly all fragrance categories. And if you're familiar with Touch the Fire Twice and you've seen other videos, you know I often like to bring actual plants, fruits, foods, beverages, what have you, when I'm comparing whether it's juniper berries or amaretto liqueur or guava nectar. But oddly enough, I went to a few grocery stores and I couldn't find any fresh plums. I did find, which I had planned to purchase, some prunes. Now you may have seen prunes when you were younger at your granny's house because they are often used to keep digestion in top shape, but they are really essentially, they look like big old fat huge raisins. I really like them. They're quite tasty, though you figure this is one whole plum, so you don't need a lot of them because you're not gonna eat 5-6 plums in one sitting. But they're dried. I'll tear it apart here. Sometimes you're going to get this note in a plum fine fragrance, and it is that dried, rich, seems almost kind of boozy because you get so many dried fruit notes in aged liqueurs. Sweet, again, that honeyed style a little bit, almost a little floral, just feels very holiday as well. Dried fruit, think of your fruitcake breads. You've got all of those dried fruits with spiced flavors. And now let's dig into the fragrances we're going to explore together today. So I have 6 candles that have a plum note within them across different fragrance categories. We're going to dig into them, talk about the different ways that plum can be expressed in these fragrances, and of course, what I sniff, what I like about them, which ones I love. So first, let's dig into what I'm considering the fruity spicy fragrance category for plum. And that is using Bath & Body Works Sweet Cinnamon Plum. This is in stores fall 2022 as a new blend from Bath & Body Works. Notes juicy plum, cinnamon apples, ground clove buds. And this is, to me, your introductory plum. So this is the most mass appeal because it is not particularly groundbreaking and not a polarizing scent. It really comes across as, they say juicy plum. For me, it's kind of like a cooked syrupy plum. Many of these are that syrupy depth to give that rich sweetness, that velvety vibe of plum. And this is no exception. Very much a cooked syrupy plum. I suppose a bit of apple mixed in there. Again, cooked almost like if you had like a cooked plums or not quite an apple sauce, because it is plum primarily, but with a little bit of cooked apple in there. Maybe even some of the tart skin of an apple. When it comes to cinnamon and clove buds, cinnamon is there, which is why I do call this fruity spicy, but it's not your red hot cinnamon. It is a baking spice, sort of a cooked spice added to your overall plum note versus its own heavy note that's coming to battle. The other thing I get in this one that I didn't get the first time I smelled it, and I've only burned this once or twice, is I actually get a little bit of a medicinal edge, kind of a little bit of like a leathery edge or Band-Aid smell. And in fine fragrance, there are some notes that can come across leathery / Band-Aid, whether it's some woods can do that or certain alcohol notes sometimes will bring that kind of wet Band-Aid scent. It's not a terrible thing, but there is this medicinal kind of adhesive note just somewhere in the background. Could be my nose playing tricks on me, and many folks could just see it as tart and sweet and bright, and that really is mostly what it is. I'm getting very nitpicky with this, but end of day, it is going to be your mass appeal, fruity, spicy plum. Now let's move to floral. For floral, we're going to look at Voluspa. As you can see here, a small 3.2 ounce glass jar Voluspa in Japanese Plum Bloom. Notes of plum bloom petals and leaves, ripe plum fruit, and crushed currants. Now, what is interesting that I didn't talk about at the top of the video, Japanese plums, if this is truly a Japanese plum, are actually not so much plums, but from the apricot family, known as ume or umeboshi, which translates to preserved plums or Japanese salted plums. And I'm assuming that's what this comes from, but as they say, the plum bloom, you're primarily looking for the blossom, the floral. So if I were to smell this without knowing the notes, I wouldn't necessarily pick plum, but I would get a very sweet, honeyed-like, going back to that plum, honeyed-like floral. It's rich, but delicate at the same time. And the blossoms from Japanese plum trees are considered to be very fragrant, like you've spritzed a honey mist through the air, unlike Sakura cherry blossoms, which actually have little to no fragrance, though of course in fragrance such as Bath & Body Works, cherry blossom is often listed as a note, but smelling cherry blossoms, you're not going to get much of a scent typically. This actually reminds me a bit of the Emmy Essentials candle Sakura, again, talking about cherry blossoms in fragrance. That was a sweet, light, delicate, springy, honey-like floral. What I like about this and the Emmy Essentials, which I probably would prefer if I had to choose between them since they are somewhat similar, is that though it is honey-like, it is not heavy or, ambery or too dark or overwhelming the way that some florals can just be heady. It's not really heady. It still is young, bright, early spring, delicate. And it is that plum blossom, and in this case, bloom. So pretty, not what I typically would think of as a plum fragrance, but shows one of the many ways that plum can appear. Now let's move to woody floral. So we're gonna take floral with us, but add woody to it. And we're gonna do that digging into HomeWorx by Slatkin & Co. Haunted Woods. This one was a bit of a surprise for me. I purchased it and I loved it, and I have actually purchased a few backups. First of all, when it comes to sort of your Halloween candles, which this one is marketed as, yes, this is not your, super luxurious, subdued, understated, fine fragrance vessel. But man, I'm okay with that. And I love just the vibe that this brings. Again, very Halloween. It is dark blue, kind of like a graveyard or something. There's a bit of an old sort of like, Hitchcockian house up there on the hill with these big pumpkins overgrowing and the moon hanging deep in the sky. It just brings that cold autumn night vibe, very obviously, but obvious work sometimes. And just this pretty matching dusty dark blue wax. Just, I'm a fan of the branding on this one. Notes though, importantly, dark woods, dark plum, black rose, and amber. So that is where we've got woody, which I'll get into, and floral, but a very different floral than the bright, fresh, spring-like Japanese plum bloom. This one, I could probably do a full in-depth sniff and review, comparison review on this one, but I love this fragrance. This is in my top 2 of this video for sure. The plum is absolutely there. It is a dark plum. It is not overly sweet the way that you'll see in some of them. It's very sweet and syrupy. It's the fruit, but it's almost more a balance between dried and fresh. It's not the honeyed, syrupy sweet. It's darker. It's not quite dank, but it is darker. A bit of perhaps that dried raisin-like plum, but also in here for dark woods, they don't tell us what kind of woods, but my nose is telling me perhaps maybe a cedar wood, kind of that resinous, dry, reddish brown richness that you get from cedar wood. The rose in here is a powdery, deep, velvety, rich, sensual rose. Very evenly balanced between the plum, the rose, and the woods and the amber. These are even players. And I really love rose with cedar woods and with black teas and things like that. Perhaps even more so than just a fresh, dewy rose, though that can be very pretty. Because it's this juxtaposition of fresh and dark, but they all express themselves in sort of this deep, rich, cool, not cooling, so not minty, not birchy, but there's still like this dark night sort of expression of plum and, let's say, cedarwood and rose. Also, the amber in here, you're getting some base of kind of that really sweetly animalic muskiness that amber brings you. And it's just, primo. I love this candle. The plum is not as obvious as a few of these, but it is very clearly the rich, velvety, seductive fruit in this candle for our woody floral expression of plum. Then let's move to earthy plum, straight up earthy plum. Now I will say this is the one candle that I dislike, and I purchased it nose blind, so I purchased it online without having smelled it because it is a plum based candle from a brand I really love, which is Boy Smells. This is their Prunus, which is the genus of trees that your stone fruits are typically from. So think your plums, cherries, peaches, nectarines, apricots, almonds. The notes on this one are intriguing. So oak moss, which if you've seen my forest oak moss Lofco video, check it out here. If you have not, I dig deep into oak moss and the rich, damp, green earthiness that it brings, which I can see with this. Oak moss, fig, really love fig. Fig can express itself. Similarly to plum, bright, fresh, or richer, dried. Plum, vanilla, and yuzu. Yuzu being a citrus fruit of East Asian origin, often used for flavorings and fragrance. But I don't know, with this candle, it is so dirty and earthy that I almost wonder if something went off with it, if it was old stock, because though Boy Smells describes it as being grounded in an earthy oak moss with some vanilla and cedar, they say that it's fruit forward with your plum and yuzu and some freshness from fig and rose. And it could be just a rare fragrance that kind of disagrees with my nose, but I find it hard to find the plum within here. And the dirty, almost moldiness that I get from this is what makes me think that either this one's old and the oils are off. I purchased it on Amazon, who's to say? So I hesitated whether I should include this in the review or not, but there is a heavily perfumed edge to this, which could be the oak moss playing with the vanilla, the cedar. If this is what it's supposed to smell like, then this certainly gets the earthy plum label from me, though Boy Smells considers this a fruity botanical blend. For me, it is dirty. This is your dirty plum. But some folks could really like it. There are folks who really enjoy that dank, dirty, earthy ground scents. Now let's move on to perhaps my favorite in this video, which falls within the woody spicy, and that is Nest Autumn Plum. You may have seen I did an in-depth sniff comparison review of this, which you can watch here if you've not seen it, but it is perhaps the most well-rounded, I think probably most beautiful expression of plum across the 6 fragrances we're talking through today. Now notes on this one are wild plum, cinnamon, patchouli leaf, and cashmere wood to capture the sweet woody aroma of fresh fall and autumn leaves. Now cashmere wood, as I discussed in that video, is actually an accord that's usually based on cedarwood, amber, musk, vanilla, and amber, of course, you could nest down additional notes that make up sort of your ambergris fragrance. But this one, I won't spend a ton of time on it because I recommend, if you're into plum, checking out that video if you have not. But this is the perfect balance of woody, spicy. So it is probably the closest to an amber plum for me. It is syrupy, sweet, sophisticated, elegant, sensual. This could be a bedroom plum for sure. The spice, I love the cinnamon is there, but it is truly the cinnamon bark, which cinnamon is cinnamon bark, so, you know, being obvious there. But it is not a red hot cinnamon. It is not a powdery cinnamon. It is a soft, supportive spice that is warming to that syrupy, honeyed-like plum. I would almost call it nectar in the sense of like cooked down plum juice. Not dried like a prune. It doesn't lean so much your dried raisiny. It's that fresh, but it's that really condensed, syrupy like sweetness of plum. And the patchouli adds that edge of darkness and some herbaceousness to it, like a fresh patchouli leaf. I just can't speak highly enough of this. It is strong. It is not overwhelming. It is just such a beautiful homage to plum and plum in fragrances. It's kind of the best of all worlds when it comes to the things I love in the fruitiness of your sweet cinnamon plum Bath & Body Works, a bit of that depth, the darkness from the Haunted Woods. And then there's one other candle I've not gone through yet that also reminds me a bit of this. And this is just the elevated, kind of idealized version of plum for me. Love this one. Highly recommend checking it out. If you check out only one candle from this video, it would have to be the Nest Autumn Plum, though close second with that Haunted Woods. That's really, really nice as well. So we move from our woody, spicy family, Autumn Plum, to another, what I would consider woody spicy, which is a Bath & Body Works White Barn Peppered Plum. Now this came out in 2017. It actually came back in test stores in 2022, failed test, but what I've heard is that it actually smelled a bit different than this original. So I'm very specifically talking about the 2017 version, which the notes on this were sweet plum, fresh saffron spice, and black peppercorn. This is not as sweet and syrupy as the Autumn Plum. It is the fresh true plum, a little bit of a floral edge to it, not blossoms, but a bit of the floral edge that plum can at times express. A little bit of that syrupiness, the sensual side of it. Black pepper, I don't get a lot of true spiciness that peppercorn can sometimes bring to fine fragrance, though enough that I do clearly call this spicy, and it's not a cinnamon spice the way that your sweet cinnamon plum is very cinnamon forward for the spice. And the saffron. Ooh, saffron is so difficult to describe. Ask 10 chefs and 10 perfumers to describe saffron and you'll probably get 30 descriptions. It's often considered exotic, expresses itself many different ways, sometimes a little rubbery, sometimes soft hay-like almost, a little bit leathery, kind of suede, earthy. And one of my favorite perfumes is Santal Carmine from Atelier Cologne, and that has a heavy hit of saffron in it, along with sandalwood and guaiac wood, some musk, vanilla, cedarwood, all the hits basically. And this reminds me a bit of that, thanks to the saffron that's in here. That's also what confirms to me that this truly is saffron in the blend, because it does remind me a bit of the Santal Carmine, which has saffron as a top note. This is one of the first plum fragrances I really enjoyed, so it kind of holds a special nostalgic place in my heart's nose. There are similarities between the sweet cinnamon plum, though this is juicier, fruitier, a little more mass appeal. But again, I get that medicinal edge to that still. and a little bit like the autumn plum, though I would say the autumn plum is juicier, more syrupy, more complex with the addition of the cashmere wood and the patchouli and the cinnamon. This is a calmer, lighter, like daytime, and this is the dark nighttime version of an autumn plum. But beautiful. I would love to see them bring it back in its original form. It's been 5 years, don't expect them to at this point. So that wraps up the fragrance overview for the first in our Name That Note series. This was by no means exhaustive across fragrance families. There was nothing truly gourmand, there was nothing bakery. There are beautiful plum fragrances, I'm certain, across those. You can do plum tarts and plum ice creams and plum vanilla. Like, there are so many that I haven't dug into personally, but I'm certain are out there. So all that to say, if you have smelled these, if you love these, if you have smelled Prunus, would love to know what you think of that. If you have other plum fragrances that you would like to have seen here and want to share with us, especially thinking the gourmand or bakery side of things that I missed out on here, would love to hear from you on those. Let me know what you think of this series, what maybe the next note you would like to explore for our next installment of Name That Note. Let me know what you think. Always happy to take your feedback and appreciate everyone watching and commenting and coming along for the fragrance journey. And until next time, take care.